Welcome to Nightborne Whispers, where shadows speak and stories linger. Dim the lights, close your eyes, and let the eerie tales guide you through the mysteries of the night. Are you ready to hear what the darkness has to say? Let the whispers begin.
Welcome back to Nightborne Whispers. Tonight, I'll tell you the story of a man named Tom and the strange, old clock he discovered, one that held a dark secret and a sinister power. This is the clock that ticked backward. Tom wasn't a collector of old things, but one evening, while wandering through a small, forgotten antique shop tucked away on the edge of town, something caught his eye. The shop was cluttered, filled with relics of a bygone era, furniture, dusty books, broken trinkets, and in the corner, barely visible beneath layers of dust, sat an old, decrepit clock. Tom was drawn to it almost instinctively. The clock was weathered, its wooden frame darkened with age, and the glass covering the face was cloudy with grime. But what really caught his attention was the ticking, a slow, rhythmic sound that seemed off. As he got closer, he realized the clock wasn't just ticking backward. It was moving in reverse. The shopkeeper didn't seem to know much about it, simply shrugging when Tom asked if it worked. He gave Tom a price that seemed too low for such a unique piece, and without thinking too much about it, Tom bought the clock and took it home. Later that night, he placed it on the mantel in his living room. As it ticked away, slowly winding backward, he couldn't shake the strange feeling it gave him. Something was unsettling about the way it moved, like it was counting down to something. But what? He brushed the thought aside. After all, it was just an old clock. Or so he thought. That night, as Tom lay in bed, the house was quiet. Too quiet. His eyes were heavy, but just as he was drifting off, the faint sound of ticking reached his ears. Slowly, steadily, it grew louder, echoing through the silence. Tom sat up, confused. He remembered the strange clock he had brought home from the antique shop. The ticking, it wasn't normal. It wasn't just ticking, it was ticking backward, each second winding time in reverse. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to his imagination. But then something strange happened. The events of the day began to replay in his mind. Conversations, moments, even feelings. All of it playing in reverse, as if time itself was slipping out of his control. The next morning, Tom woke up feeling off. Everything seemed normal at first, but as the day went on, a chilling realization set in. The day was repeating itself. Every interaction, every small detail, it was the same as the day before. He was living the same day over again, and all the while in the background, he could hear that clock ticking. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences began to intensify. Objects would disappear, only to reappear hours later. Conversations he had with people seemed eerily familiar, as though he'd already lived through them. But the most unsettling part was the visions. It started small, quick flashes of moments that didn't make sense. Tom would be sitting in his living room, and suddenly, he'd see a brief image of the room as it looked decades ago. The wallpaper, the furniture, everything from another time. The flashes became more frequent, more vivid. He wasn't just seeing the past, he was experiencing it. One night, Tom sat by the clock, staring at it in the dim light. He watched as the hands moved steadily backward. Each tick seemed to echo louder in his mind, and with each passing moment, the visions grew more disturbing. He saw people he didn't know, walking through his house as it was years ago, strangers from long before his time. Tom felt like he was intruding, like he wasn't supposed to be there. But the clock kept ticking. That's when it hit him. The clock wasn't just showing him the past. It was dragging him toward it, pulling him back in time, 1 second at a time. The more Tom thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit together. This wasn't just a broken clock. It was a device, something ancient, something powerful. It was reversing time, slowly but surely. And if the clock reached midnight, if it wound all the way back, he'd be trapped, stuck in the past, unable to return. He tried to take the clock apart, but it was no use. The gears inside were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Intricate, delicate, as though they were designed to keep moving backwards no matter what. No matter how hard he tried, the clock wouldn't stop ticking. Desperate, Tom began to search for answers. He scoured old books, looking for anything that could explain the strange symbols on the clock's face. That's when he discovered the legend of the timekeeper's curse. According to ancient folklore, certain clocks were cursed, imbued with dark magic that allowed them to manipulate time. But there was always a price. Those who tampered with time would eventually become trapped, lost in the past forever. The clock was cursed, and Tom knew that if he didn't find a way to stop it before midnight, his fate would be sealed. As the days passed, Tom's sense of time grew more distorted. He couldn't tell what was real anymore, whether he was in the present or the past. The visions came more frequently, more vividly. He saw glimpses of his childhood, moments with his family, and even people he didn't recognize from long before his time. But the clock continued its relentless ticking, inching ever closer to midnight. The hands moved in reverse, faster now, as though time itself was slipping through his fingers. Tom was running out of time. In a last-ditch effort, he decided to destroy the clock. It was the only way. If he could break it before midnight, maybe, just maybe, he could stop whatever force was pulling him backward. He raised a hammer to the clock, and something strange happened. The ticking grew louder, more insistent, as if the clock knew what he was about to do. The room around him blurred, and he was no longer in the present. He was standing in the house as it had been decades ago, watching strangers walk through the living room, oblivious to his presence. Tom's hands trembled. The hammer felt heavy in his grasp, but he knew this was his only chance. Midnight was seconds away. With a surge of adrenaline, Tom swung the hammer down, shattering the clock's glass face. The ticking stopped abruptly, and for a brief moment, everything was silent. Time itself seemed to freeze. Then, as if released from some unseen force, the room around him shifted back to normal. Tom was back in the present, the strange visions of the past gone. The clock lay in pieces on the floor, its gears scattered across the room. He had done it. He had broken the clock, and time had returned to normal. Tom breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the weight lift from his chest. But as he sat there, surrounded by the broken remnants of the cursed clock, something caught his attention. It was faint, barely noticeable, a soft, distant ticking. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He listened closely, straining to hear. But the ticking was there, just at the edge of his awareness. Faint, but unmistakable. He had broken the clock, but had he really escaped its curse? Or was time still slipping backwards in the distance, waiting to drag him back once more? Thank you for joining us tonight. Some clocks tell more than just the time, and sometimes the past is closer than we think. Until next time, on Nightborne Whispers, make sure to listen closely. You never know when time might start ticking backward.
You've reached the end of tonight's tale, but the shadows never truly sleep. If you're craving more eerie whispers, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for your next journey into the unknown. Until we meet again, rest well if you dare.